and welcome back to my podcast Racing. It's been a while, I've missed you guys, and I'm really looking forward to talking more about movies and stuff and sharing my opinions with you guys. So, welcome back. In today's episode of Podcast Racing, I'm going to be discussing the theatrical and streaming simultaneous release thing that many studios have been doing lately, and I'm going to be talking about this with my good friend Roxy. How are you doing, Roxy?
Hey, hello. It's good to be back on the podcast.
Yeah, it's really good to have you back. I'll ask you first, what's your opinion on the streaming and theatrical same day release method? Do you think that it was a good idea, or do you think that it backfired completely?
Well, to put it shortly, I think it's a good idea, just accessibility wise,
Yeah.
getting more people to be able to see the movies, like the most amount of people that can see them is a good thing. But we'll go into detail about that because I have a lot of opinions about different parts of it.
Right. I think that in general, like there were definitely good intentions behind it. I think that for me personally, a lot of the films that were released simultaneously, both in theaters and streaming on the same day, I I didn't see all the films, but a lot of films that were released like this, I mostly saw them on streaming because many of them were released before I was vaccinated, when the pandemic was still going on pretty strong. I mean, now at the time of filming this, there's news about the Delta variant, which, oh boy, but basically before I was vaccinated, I was being extra careful, and a lot of these films, and it was much easier to access the streaming service than to go out and risk being in a movie theater. So I saw, like Godzilla versus Kong, and all these other movies on streaming services like HBO Max first. A couple of them I did actually see, was able to go safely to the theater, but for the most part, regarding my own health and safety, I thought that it was better to go just watch it on a streaming service. Even though I usually prefer the theatrical experience, it was just safer for me.
Yeah, definitely. I'm the same way. I haven't been to a theater since before the pandemic. And gosh, like the last movie I saw in a theater was Spider-Man Homecoming. It's been a while.
That came out like 4 years ago.
Oh my god, I meant Spider-Man Far From Home.
Oh,
Oh my
Spider-Man
god.
Far From Home.
So yeah, the last movie I saw in a theater was Spider-Man Far From Home.
Gotcha.
The second one, not the first one.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, but I'm excited to get back in the theater now that like things are opening up again and I'm fully vaccinated. Because I do like the theaters, like you're going there for an experience. But I don't know, like the simultaneous release that they've been like pushing during COVID, I think that's useful. I don't know. They've been experimenting with like sort of streaming releases for years now, and it's like interesting to watch it like all kind of come together during the pandemic.
It's not a perfect solution for
Mhm.
sure. Like I think that there are films that where the filmmakers were clearly intending it to be made for the theatrical experience and to be seen in theaters because that's how they've seen movies a lot of their whole life. But like what one thing that I think that was pretty crappy is that Warner Brothers got the most hate, I guess, got the most backlash for releasing movies because when they said that all of their 2021 movie releases would be in both streaming and theatrical on the same day, they definitely got the most backlash from that. And what was pretty crappy about their intentions were good, but what was pretty crappy on their part was that they actually didn't tell any of the filmmakers beforehand that they would be doing this. They just announced it, and then many of the filmmakers were really upset. Denis Villeneuve, who made Dune, he was the most vocal about his distaste for his movie being put on streaming because he's a connoisseur of the theatrical experience basically, and he said all that kind of pretentious stuff. I still love him as a director, and he seems like a nice person, but he was being a bit pretentious. But at the same time though, like a movie like Dune, I absolutely do not want to see on HBO Max first. Like that's one of the only movies where like I have to see it in a theater. Of course, I don't want to get sick and I don't want to get the Delta variant, but like Dune, I have to see on a big screen with the best sound system. I'm willing to pay like a lot of money to basically get the best experience to see this movie specifically. But you know, other movies like Godzilla versus Kong or Wonder Woman 1984. I don't care enough about those movies. I never cared about those enough about those movies in the first place to be like, oh man, I have to see this in the theater. But I think just my opinion on this whole method in general depends on the my interest in the movie and the quality of the movie. Well, you know, I mean that's for most people, but I can understand where Denis is coming from, but personally, I think for the most part that this method was good. But you know, it's not a perfect method because Denis said that one of the main concerns they had about it being put on streaming is that you know people would pirate it, people would find a way to digitally copy the movie and then release it on torrent sites, and you know where people could watch movies kind of illegally and. You know, I do understand that concern. You know, that can prevent people from seeing it at the box office, and you know, him getting his bonuses, and the studio making money and all, and the studio and the theaters making money and all that, and people. I'm sure that you know, the thoughts of people watching their movies on a phone or a laptop probably traumatizes filmmakers like Steven Spielberg or Martin Scorsese who are so used to the big theatrical experience because that's what they're used to. That's what they grew up with. And that's what, you know, I usually prefer as well, seeing a movie on the biggest screen possible. But, you know, the pandemic was an unprecedented time for a lot of people. And so I think that it's not a perfect solution. I do agree that, you know, like the biggest flaws, you know, like that this makes the movie susceptible to pirating. But for the most part, I think that it was a decision with good intentions and gave people something to do while stuck in self quarantine.
Yeah, definitely. Like pandemic specific, I think more streaming options is good, and like no one's gonna be able to go out and see anything with like most places having gatherings of over like 10 people completely shut down and any like public place like shut down. That said, like on top of that, worries about like pirating and like illegal downloading, that's definitely something to like talk about with this, and like streaming makes it happen, but people would pirate movies anyway. There's like people start doing it before they're released anywhere. So I want to put a pin in that and get back to that. But I kind of want to talk about a bit about sort of like the experience. And so like you run into this sort of thing in like any media, any like creative media, and like as a person who makes creative media, a filmmaker, you specifically want your film viewed a certain way, and then that's like a lot of people will be like, I need it on the big screen. I did all these wide shots. They're not going to look the same on like anything ranging from a TV to like a small phone, which you would get like in streaming. And I think that like there's definitely like an argument for that. But I think there's more to it because I don't know, like even like paintings or whatever, like a lot of it, I don't know, comes off pretentious because you want things to be presented a certain way, and that's what you think about when you're making it. That said, only a limited number of people. That's a fairly accessible mode of entertainment. Whereas, like, unlike a play or like paintings or whatnot, where it's like harder to like be able to go see it, and like tickets are so expensive and you need to travel to go see whichever. You have movie theaters in a lot of places, and tickets are like, I don't know, like between $10 and $15 most places.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's relatively inexpensive, but again, it's not the most accessible for every single person.
Right.
And like if you're paying for a streaming service that's like about the same price as a movie ticket just per month and you can watch so much at like any time, that's a bit more accessible. Because it'll come like straight into your house or like on your phone and you could watch it anywhere at any time. That like okay, I do just want to say that a lot of filmmakers just need to unclench. Streaming's the future, but like I get where they're coming from, but I just think leaning too far into the sort of like artistic arguments about it kind of lend itself to like sort of capitalist anti-accessibility arguments where you allow films to just become a like bourgeoisie thing and like no one else gets to experience anything, and it's sort of, I've used the term inaccessible very broadly in this, but like a lot of the people who are gonna like appreciate films and strictly artistically are gonna, like you said, pay a lot to see it like on a big screen with like the best sound quality to see that theater, but you gotta be like into films for that. Is that the only audience you want? Because maybe it is, but maybe it shouldn't be. And like maybe like letting more people experience it broadly would be better because there's probably people who are into films like that would want to pay a lot to go see something on the big screen, great quality, but like they just can't at the time. And I feel like it's better if like they can see it. And like if it's on streaming, there's gonna be less need to pirate it. Then I don't know. You can't like release every movie for free and just put it on YouTube, but at some points I kind of wish that we could. But that's a whole other capitalist argument than other than a film argument.
Yeah, I mean, as a financially struggling young adult still finding his place in the world, I can definitely relate to the temptation of just wanting to, just go to a pirating site and see a movie for free instead of paying a certain amount for a theater ticket or a streaming service. I definitely, understand that. I agree with you that streaming is the future, but I don't want the theatrical experience to completely go away. I do think though that streaming could be a good home more for movies that might not be as like high caliber like quality, but and again, this is just, a personal thing of mine. I know that not plenty of people are going to disagree with me when I say this, but that there are plenty of movies that definitely belong more on a are definitely have more of a streaming or direct to DVD quality and don't really belong in movie theaters like some of the HBO movies that they released in theaters and streaming, like I don't know, like the Tom and Jerry movie. Like, are those like I didn't even see those movies. I wasn't even interested in seeing them when I had HBO Max, let alone seeing them in a theater. So yeah, it is a personal thing for me. You know what's funny is that I don't think that this whole streaming and theatrical release method that these studios are doing, I don't think that this would have even happened if Universal didn't decide to release Trolls World Tour directly onto like various streaming services for, well, not streaming services but online basically for $20. So you've heard about that, right?
Yeah, and like it was super controversial, and yet Trolls World Tour is doing great.
Yeah, like
It's doing great.
Trolls World Tour did really well, but that's because it was released at the height. Universal decided, okay, basically the pandemic is really really bad now. It just started basically, and we don't see an end in sight for when theaters can be open. So we're gonna release this movie directly onto online for $20, and theaters are unhappy about that. They were like, "Oh, you should have waited. This movie, kids could have brought in to experience a true theatrical experience." Kids don't care. kids don't care, really care whether, like, and some kids might even prefer just seeing, Trolls World Tour at home rather than in the theater because they don't have to, sit all bored and whiny and stuff in the car rides. I bet some parents even prefer that too if their kids get really whiny about that.
You say that, but then I started thinking about it because I know as for a fact when I was like a small child, I went to see A Bug's Life in the theater like probably 1 million times. I'd beg my mom every single weekend, and I'm like, I
Hmm.
need to go see that, mom. And then I was just thinking about it. I'm like, it's like computer animated Pixar. I'm like, I think the experience isn't that different. But then I just like had like this vivid memory of like feeling the sound and like watching it huge on the screen. And I'm like, oh my God, I had like a literal, I literally appreciate that theatrical experience of watching A Bug's Life on the big screen when I was a kid. And I just appreciated it right in this moment.
I gotcha, I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's many kids
Mhm.
like you, where, like, yeah, they would love to go to the theater and see, like SpongeBob or Tom and Jerry or whoever
Mhm.
on the big screen, with their hilarious antics. But, I'm not saying that all kids, are like that, where they prefer, being at home and they don't care about, whether it's on the big screen or not. But, I'm just saying that there might be, some kids like that, and
Oh, I definitely didn't care when I was a kid, like at all, about the theatrical experience. And I don't know, there are a lot of kind of garbagey kids movies that I definitely watched and like just got the DVD for $5 at Walmart and like watched a million times at home. None of those would have been improved by a theatrical experience, and I can barely remember them now. But
right,
I don't
right.
know.
I saw Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in theaters,
Hmm.
and I did not like either of those films as a kid, and I still do not like them as an adult, and the theatrical experience did not improve the quality of the film at all. However, there are also films that I saw as a kid where I would have loved to see it in a theater.
Hmm.
Like the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, which I genuinely think is a great, hilarious movie. I actually like it more now as an adult than I did as a kid. First two Shrek movies, The Prince of Egypt, and various Pixar movies like A Bug's Life and the first two Toy Story films. Man, as a kid, like I actually no, I'm sorry. I did see Toy Story 2 in the theaters as a kid, but like the first one and A Bug's Life and like all these other films, I would have as a kid, I enjoy many of these films already, but I know that as a kid, if I were to have seen it on the big screen, my mind would have been blown. I vividly remember seeing Toy Story 3 in the theater. I don't really remember seeing Toy Story 2 in the theater because I was only like 4 years old, but supposedly my dad told me that I got really bored towards the end and I just wanted to go home. But years later, seeing Toy Story 3 with my family in the theater, me at 15 years old, oh man, when I was well, I've always liked movies, but I was really starting to get into it around like 15, 16. So seeing Toy Story 3 was like, man, this is awesome. Like, yeah, especially in a theater, like, wow. But, but like but there are other like it depends on the movie for me, really. Like Trolls World Tour. I have seen it now. I made a for my YouTube channel. I made a ranking of all the Pixar movies and worst to best, and I'm doing the same for the DreamWorks animated movies. And so I forced myself to watch Trolls World Tour. I really didn't want to, and I was able to watch it for quote unquote free on Hulu. Thank God. I definitely would not be paying $20 for this to see that movie online, or even $10 or $15 to see it in a theater. Like that's a movie where I'm just like, yeah, this is definitely not a theater worthy movie for me personally. But there are some kids that uh in an alternate universe where Trolls World Tour was released theatrically, and some kids would maybe really enjoy it, and it would lead them down this path of really appreciating film in general and the theatrical experience from possibly seeing Trolls World Tour or even the first Trolls in the theater. I don't know. I don't want to, I don't want to completely like diss Trolls World Tour. It just, for me, it was just, I guess, spoilers for my upcoming DreamWorks video, but that was not good.
So you didn't absolutely love Trolls World Tour.
It deserves a Criterion Collection release. No. Yeah, no. It's I'll talk more about that when I release my DreamWorks video. But anyways, you said that before, you had said that you had some more opinions regarding the streaming and theatrical method that you want to talk about.
I guess like any time film gets released different ways, like I don't know, when they started playing movies on TV or like VHSs started to exist, we go to DVDs, then Blu-ray, what have you, all that sort of thing. People never know how it's gonna go. So like with streaming, like okay, they released Trolls World Tour for like $20 and then like that goes well for Trolls World Tour. Then like Disney is like, we're gonna release Mulan on Disney Plus, and you can only watch it for like what was it, like $40 or something?
$30, but it was
$30.
still outrageous.
Outrageous, and you already had to have Disney Plus, and like
Ugh.
no one's happy about it, and it's like, yeah, why are you doing that? That's weird, and no one liked the movie anyway. So it's going a bunch of different ways depending on how people are doing it. If you're a studio and you're like, I'm like, what is it, Warner Brothers, they're like, we're gonna put all our stuff on streaming too, but not tell any of the filmmakers. So that's a lack of communication. It'll be interesting to see how it's all gonna shake out, because I don't think it's like flattened out, because like things are still being released on streaming and same day in theaters, but like more people are going to theaters, so they could theoretically stop doing that, but I feel like they've realized they've tapped into a market that they wouldn't have had. That's the thing. If it's released the same day, do you want to charge an outrageous amount of money, like in addition to a streaming service? Do you just want to put it on the internet, possibly for free, and get ad revenue? Like, but like what? I don't think anyone's doing that yet, but like, I don't know, sometimes things get just released on YouTube. And usually not like same day, but maybe a bit later. It's interesting from a financial perspective. Money and art are so intertwined in the conversation about movies that it's weird to talk about. And I guess like it is like that with any entertainment. I don't love thinking about the financial side, but it's something important, you know?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, definitely
Hmm.
is something important to discuss because so how it usually works is that studios will ship out the movie to theaters, the theaters will get a cut of the profits, and the studio will get a cut of the profits. But with streaming, since the studios own the streaming service, that makes it a little bit different. So that in terms of the profit distribution, that makes things. I can understand why for like filmmakers and for theater venues. I do think some of them are being a little bit pretentious and overreacting about this, but at the same time, I can understand because a lot of these theater owners, the part of the profits is their income, is their livelihood. This money that they're getting is how they put food on the table for their families. And for these filmmakers, well, I mean, a lot of these filmmakers are super rich Hollywood elitists, but but like when it comes to streaming though, like with HBO, with the Warner Brothers, HBO Max is their streaming service. Whatever viewership gets is on HBO Max, all the profits goes to themselves. So basically, till that really tips the scales in terms of profit distribution. And if people are seeing a movie a lot more times on HBO Max, then theaters aren't making as much. So I can kind of understand the why some people might be upset because maybe it's the theater venues thought that Trolls World Tour, the first Trolls was actually a big hit at the box office, very successful, and a big franchise spun off of it, even though it was a horrible movie that I never want to see again. But the Trolls World Tour, people thought, people saw them, saw that movie and thought, oh, the first one was successful, kids liked it, and so the second one will be successful. But then the Universal decides to release this one. They probably Universal probably had contracts prior to the pandemic. They had contracts to release it theatrically, and the venues were probably expecting Universal to, just like all these other studios, to postpone the release date so that Trolls World Tour could get a theatrical release. But then Universal's like, you know what? We want to treat people stuck at home right now. We're just gonna release it theatrically. But that was a breach of contract, and the theaters won't make any. They don't get any profits from Trolls World Tour doing so well online. I mean, obviously now Universal and the theaters, they were able to work it out with the new contract, but rewinding back to going back to April, I can kind of understand why these theaters were people were so upset, but I mean they are overreacting a little bit, but at the same time I kind of can understand, and that's Roxy's very cute cat, by the way, in case you heard that meow.
Sorry about
She's agreeing
him.
with me.
I think he has
Oh,
opinions about streaming that he would like to share. Um, Anyway, yeah, I think that's because, again, the theaters make money from showing movies, and I don't want theaters to close because everyone's watching everything on streaming. Again, it's I think more accessibility is important, but also the as a movie fan, just the experience of going to a theater, that's important, and we talked about it. But if I guess the fear is that everything switches completely to streaming, all theaters close,
That's
except
not
for
yeah,
five, and
yeah,
then you
but
have
that's
to
not
travel
gonna
to those.
that's
But
not
yeah,
gonna
that's
happen. That's not gonna happen for this century. I highly doubt that. Yeah, like people, like these theater people that are so afraid that oh, people only want to go to streaming now and theaters will die out. Like some theater venues did go bankrupt during the pandemic, but but I mean, look at the time of filming this, look at Black Widow, Fast and Furious 9, A Quiet Place 2, all really successful in theaters.
like.
I mean, well, Fast and Furious 9 and A Quiet Place were released only in theaters. Well, actually, now A Quiet Place 2 is available to watch on Paramount Plus. But Black Widow was released both in theaters and Disney Plus for $30, and that's doing really well in theaters specifically right now. People. Well, that's also because Marvel fans are aware that Black Widow's a big action-packed superhero movie. So, and seeing that on their laptop is just not as impressive. So, I mean, yeah, again, it depends on the movie, but there is sort of a resurgence at the box office right now with Black Widow and Fast and Furious 9. And so, I do not think at all that. And Godzilla versus Kong did well in theaters and HBO Max, but more so in theaters back in March. So, I don't think theaters are going to be dying out anytime soon. But sorry, I interrupted you. You go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's a unfounded catastrophizing kind of worry that theaters are gonna completely die out right this minute when everything goes to streaming. I don't know, am interested in seeing how that's gonna transition. So I used to live in this small town that had a movie theater. It only had four screens, so it would play four movies at once, and you'd have to go see it the week it would come out, because then that next week they're just switching over to the four that came out that week. Theaters like that might end up closing in the transition, because everyone could watch something like on streaming instead, which would be unfortunate because that was the like closest theater around for like miles, you know? And again, like seeing movies there is a vastly different experience than like when I go to like a movie theater in like Fairfax or Northern Virginia, and it's like it's packed and like they're playing like whatever new releases, and then the next weekend they're doing like a Miyazaki marathon. Get tickets to see all of those. So it's like theaters like that have like their new releases fund their like more artistic venues, like come see Miyazaki. We also like live shows from the Bolshoi Ballet. It's like stuff like that's not going to close because like where else are you going to go see the Bolshoi Ballet live streamed? And lots of people are into that.
That is very true. HBO Max isn't the first to do this, but they got the most attention and backlash for this method. First doing it with Wonder Woman 1984, and then they did it with all their 2021 movies. But they're not the first to do this. Netflix. Well, Netflix was first a DVD renting service, but now they're the biggest streaming service out there. But then they were doing really well in the TV world, on their streaming service. But then they wanted to get a piece of that movie action too, and so they start basically just giving. Netflix is, for better or for worse, known for basically giving a majority of the content creators almost complete creative control. Well, at least in the movie world. In the TV world, they have gotten some controversy for stepping in and interfering a bit too much with shows. But with most of their movies, they basically are just like, all right, here's several $1 million. Go ahead, make whatever you want. And they have this method where they're the ones that technically first started doing this streaming, theater and streaming thing. Not at the same time necessarily, but what Netflix has done since 2014 is they will release a movie in select theaters for maybe a 2 week, 3 week period, and then release it on their Netflix service. And many people in the industry are unhappy about that because because it's not a nationwide theatrical release, and majority of people, they're unhappy that majority of these films would just be seen first on. Well, basically, actually, no, that's not what they have the problem with. The problem that many people have with the Netflix movies is that they're being put up at the big movie award shows, and many people feel like they should just be considered as TV movies at the Emmys or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of a different topic. But HBO Max is getting all its flack for doing it on the same day. But Netflix technically they kind of did it first, not on the same day. I don't think HBO Max. I think that they had good intentions. Like I don't think that they were personally trying to rob the filmmakers or the theater venues of their profits. I think that they were thinking about the people's health and the people's wants. And I think that Netflix appreciates and honors the theatrical experience because they actually bought out and restored older independent dying movie theaters that were dying out because no one was going to them. They bought them out so that their more prestigious movies like Roma and Marriage Story could be shown, basically so that people could have a job working there.
Mm-hmm.
And Netflix would pay them to hand out tickets and popcorn and all that. So Netflix does honor the theatrical experience, and I do think that many of their movies are great and deserve to be honored at the Oscars, which is the movie award shows. And I think HBO Max honors and appreciates the theatrical experience because these Netflix and HBO Max and all these studios could just go ahead and release their movies on streaming service and keep all of the profits themselves. But these people, these studio heads and etc., they are also movie lovers who grew up with the theatrical, are used to and appreciate the theatrical experience. So, they're well, they want people to, see these movies in a theater first, and they themselves want to see movies in the theaters first. So, like I don't. So when people say that like Netflix and HBO that they're like being insulting to the movie industry or being selfish or dumb or whatever, like filmmakers like Christopher Nolan or Denis Villeneuve are saying. Like, I don't think that they're. I can kind of understand where their frustrations come through, but I don't think that they're exactly right. Like, I think that, again, it's not a perfect method because maybe these movies are open to privacy, but I think that these filmmakers, I appreciate that these studios are thinking about the people's health and preferences, and they're still honoring the theatrical experience for the most part.
Like what you're saying about like Netflix movies going for the Oscars, and then people are like, "Oh my god, it's a TV movie," but then it's not really because like Netflix streams television shows, but how different is a television show from a web series, and what's Netflix doing? Like, I often find the sort of TV versus film rivalry funny, and like the splitting hairs between it sort of absurd in a way. 'Cause there's plays, and then like movies start happening, and everyone who's like worked on plays is like, no, plays are real art, movies are just popular and they're lesser, and then whatever. And then like TV gets invented, and people in the film industry are like, no, films are art, television is like trash and it's just for lower class whatever. And then like then the internet happens, and then there's like new media and streaming and like YouTubers and stuff, and it's like, oh no, this is trash. What? And it's like people who are entrenched in these industries don't acknowledge the new media is art. And like you get this like in a lot of mediums, and it's, I find it, because it's cyclical and it's all the same arguments, and I'm like, god, get over it. Because like, again, there's differences between TV. Again, it's like presentation. Like, if you're making a movie, you're usually making it for like a giant screen, a theater experience. If you're making a play, that's like, it's not going to be, you're not going to get it from a bunch of different angles. It's going to be like sort of static, and you gotta like perform it every single night kind of thing. You're making TV, it's for like a smaller screen, same thing. So those considerations matter for the final product, but I think the rivalries are hilarious slash annoying slash, can you not see that we've been having this argument since, I don't know, plays have been around for millennia, so since then.
Yeah, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Broadway performances are were still doing really, financially well up and before the pandemic. And now that, people are getting vaccinated and things are starting to open up again, Broadway is kind of making a bit of a comeback. With limited capacity, of course. And, like when Denis Villeneuve says that the theater and streaming same date release method is harmful to movie industry, or Martin Scorsese saying that Marvel films dominating at the box office is shutting out, the independent filmmakers. Like I kind of understand where these filmmakers are coming from. I am a bit biased still because I love these filmmakers' films, but I think that a lot of these filmmakers' arguments are run kind of hollow because, back when film was first starting to come out, film was silent, black and white, and in theaters only because that was the only option.
Mm-hmm.
But then once color movies started coming out, once sound in movies started coming out, once DVDs and VHSs and etc. started coming out, people in the movie industry at the time were freaking out. They were like, "Oh man, color in movies, sound in movies, DVDs. This is the end of cinema as we know it." And no, cinema is still very much alive today. And I kind of can understand where these filmmakers are coming from, but for the most part, I'm like, cinema will survive. You guys will still be okay. The theatrical experience will continue on. that I think that wraps up basically all of my thoughts on this topic. So I'll just give the floor to you.
Yeah, I think, God, like film's been around for like 100 odd years, and it's like in the grand scheme of things, that's not that much, and it's been changing constantly, like fast. Like and it's weird how entrenched some of these ideas seem to be. It's like, oh, it's always been this way, but like, no, it hasn't. It's been like maybe more more than 100 years, but it's like in that time we saw like started with like silent movies, black and white. We got color. The studio system is like falling, and then in the advent of the blockbuster, blah blah blah, things are on TV. You can get things in your home versus having to go to a theater, and it's like it's a lot of changes in that in all that time throughout the history of cinema, like constant change, and yet people are still so resistant to it every time's it happening. And like maybe simultaneous streaming releases will stick around for like maybe it'll become a standard and like everybody will start doing it for every movie. Maybe it'll be like only movies that are like gonna be blockbusters anyway, and like big studio movies are just gonna like do releases like that. But we'll see. We'll see how it happens. We'll see how it all shakes out. I think things are doing great in theaters right now because people are finally getting back out. Like they're getting vaccinated, pandemic's over, they're like, great, I want to go out and do something. And I mean, times like that, not that like it's always a global pandemic, but every time, I don't know, there's sort of like a boom in like watching of movies, it's times like this where people are like finally like, oh, something terrible was happening. I want some sort of escapism. I'm gonna go to the theater, spend my money there.
No, yeah, that is a very good points for sure. One last thing I will say is that streaming is, gaining its popularity, and I do believe that it will be the dominant source of media viewership soon. I don't think the theatrical experience will completely die out, but I do think that streaming will continue to dominate. But I think that films going into streaming is good, because the movies from two movies from 2019 that did really well in the cinephile crowd, the Korean film Parasite and the
Mm-hmm.
French LGBT film Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those films were premiered at these prestigious film festivals. Did really got great reviews. All film lovers and cinephiles were praising them, but both of these films started to get more mainstream attention and appreciation once both of these films were released on Hulu, because the studio that distributed both these films, Neon and Hulu, they have a deal where their films will go onto Hulu for after a theatrical run. Well, that changed with the pandemic, obviously, where some Neon films went directly to Hulu, skipping a theatrical run,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But like Parasite, I was telling people about Parasite, and some of them were interested, but they had no way to watch it because Parasite wasn't being shown in like the big theaters, only in the art house theaters. And but then once it came out on Hulu, they were finally able to see it, and they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're right, Colton. This was a good movie." And Portrait of a Lady on Fire too,
Mm-hmm.
did pretty well on Hulu. People I saw noticed online, people were starting to talk about it more. Like regular people who wouldn't or can't see these movies in a theater,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that streaming can be good for not just for like mainstream lighthearted actiony comedy romantic drama stuff or whatever, but like films that had no choice but to be directly released to a streaming service like Minari from A24 or Sound of Metal for Amazon or The Father from Sony. These films, if we were living in normal times, these films would be completely forgotten about and probably not even nominated at the Oscars at all. But because of the pandemic, people are like, Okay, we need to watch something. What are we gonna watch? Ooh, how about Minari, this film about a Korean American family moving to Arkansas? Or how about The Father with Anthony Hopkins playing an old man who slowly loses his mind to dementia? Or Sound of Metal, where Riz Ahmed plays a heavy metal drummer who starts losing his hearing? These are all films that many mainstream audiences usually wouldn't watch, but decided to watch. Well, I mean, because what else were they going to watch,
Hmm.
basically? Well, actually, no. Minari and The Fathers did have theatrical runs, but most people saw them on streaming, obviously. So I think that streaming can be good for opening up people's eyes to films that have more cinema standards, like like Netflix is super popular. No, definitely the most popular streaming service, known for like Stranger Things and all that stuff. But there's also films and shows on there that are more experimental and artsy that these regular people who have Netflix are exposed to. So I think that streaming can be good for cinema as well. And I'm sorry, one last thing I will say is that I think that it was pretty crappy of Disney to release the Pixar films Soul and Luca for free on Disney Plus, but then have their own films like Raya and the Last Dragon, Black Widow, and Jungle Cruise be both in theaters and on Disney Plus for $30. Basically, Disney kind of duped Pixar out of a majority of the profits. Whereas with releasing these other films on theaters and on Disney Plus, Disney gets a majority of profits. And Disney also gets a majority of profits with the Pixar films Soul and Luca. So I think that was pretty crappy of them. So I'm hoping that the next Pixar film, Turning Red, will be released in theaters so that Pixar gets a decent cut of the profits as well. But anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
that's definitely the last thing I have to say. So do you have any final thoughts on this topic?
No, I think I've got it. I think I'm good. I think we had a great discussion about pros and cons of streaming.
All right. Being on the podcast, I really enjoyed talking about this stuff with you.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, and I want to thank you all for listening to another episode of my podcast, Podcast Racing. Later this year, besides on YouTube, I will have a second home for the podcast. I don't know what that home is at the moment, but before the year ends, I will let you know. So thank you again, and see you guys next time. Bye.
Now this is podcast racing.